Hello, my dear small but loyal audience. My name is Charles Wells, and you have tuned in to the 20th episode of The Patriot Preacher. I can't even believe that I've put out 20 of these videos, to tell the truth. And while my audience hasn't grown substantially, I do hope that those of you who do tune in enjoy our dialogue. So I have to boldly ask the question, do Black Lives Matter? It's of course a rhetorical question. Anyone but an idiot would answer with a resounding yes. And of course, be tempted to add the often criticized but true phrase that all lives matter if you indeed believe in the sanctity of life, as many of us do. But as usual with organizations on the left, the title has very little to do with preserving black lives or any lives for that matter. It is in my mind an inherently evil organization that is about the accumulation of power rather than any sort of real justice. The truth is just that every life unjustly taken deserves justice, don't you think? But you don't just join an organization claiming to do right when they do literally everything wrong. Of course, the organization of Black Lives Matter got a huge boost because of the George Floyd incident. And while Mr. Floyd's death was certainly tragic in terms that it was taken at the hands of someone who was employed by the government to save lives, Mr. Floyd did not deserve any sort of idolization. He was a lifelong criminal who victimized people all of his life. Most of the people who used him as a symbol of white oppression wouldn't have allowed the actual person, George Floyd, anywhere near their own families. Here's the thing. I believe that many supporters of the BLM movement honestly feel that they are supporting something worthwhile. But they have been deceived about what the movement is really about. Now, I hate racism. I always have. I've never really understood making judgments about others based upon something as arbitrary as skin color. It just seems petty and basically unintelligent, regardless of what direction it's going. But here are some of the reasons I could never support the Black Lives Matter movement. First of all, the premise which Black Lives Matter was created is simply not true. A person of color is 11 times more likely to be killed by another person of color than they are a white person. According to PNAS, proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences extracted from a study they conducted in 2019, that white officers are not more likely to shoot minority civilians than are minority officers. Now, every loss of life is tragic, but Washington Post database talked about police-involved deaths, put things into further context. In 2020, among those who were killed, by the way, they were all male, 2 Native Americans, 9 Asians, 46 Hispanics, 76 blacks, 149 unlabeled individuals, and 149 whites whose death, of course, don't ever get reported by the national mainstream media. Now, only 9 black individuals were actually unarmed. Oh, and by the way, as I pointed out before in another video, just because you are unarmed doesn't mean you don't constitute a danger to the police officer or others. Now, Black Lives Matter does not allow in any way, shape, or form a path of forgiveness or reconciliation. None. They don't want us to come together. This is not good for our nation as a whole, or does it allow any resolution but the one they want, which is the goal of black supremacy. You see, it's all about black power. Now, this flies in the face of every premise of Christianity and Western civilization. BLM heavily promotes homosexuality and transgenderism. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm not embracing confusion. Loving every human being, which I do, is not the same as loving whatever every human being does. BLM completely discards the notion of fatherhood as a white concept. The problem with this thought process, the extreme lack of father figures, is precisely what has placed the black community in dire straits and at risk to begin with. As I've stated in previous videos, almost every malady that faces inner city black youths, particularly young men, has much to do with the absence of a solid father figure. They are demanding reparations. This has got to be one of the most ridiculous demands to ever come from any group or organization. So how does this work exactly? Do only white people pay for this? Do people who are half black pay themselves? My grandparents didn't come to this nation until 1920. Do I have to pay since my ancestors weren't present during slavery? Only 13% of blacks were actually slaves, and only 8% of whites were actually slave owners. The entire thing is self-serving, self-ingratiating nonsense. They want to abolish prisons and police forces. Talk about a recipe for absolute anarchy in any community, and the bloodshed in the inner cities would be unprecedented, even among underdeveloped countries. It would be every person or family for themselves, and only the strong and ruthless would survive. BLM is against capitalism, which is the very system that is the great equalizer among all forms of commerce. The best way to elevate people out of poverty is capitalism. This system is why the United States of America is by far the most charitable nation on the face of the planet. Colin Kaepernick supports it. He is a biracial adoptee, by the way, if you didn't know that. Kaepernick is now obsessed with his blackness. He idolizes the late and murderous Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and worships Malcolm X. All you gotta do is watch his or see his social feeds. Malcolm X was an anti-integration, pro-violence, and a member of the virulently racist Nation of Islam who forced him out. Kaepernick makes millions from Nike, a company whose entire executive leadership team is white. Isn't this white supremacy that makes this shoe company the most murderous regime in the world? Kaepernick, of course, is completely silent on that. But you know, hashtag social warrior and so forth. So apparently not all Black Lives Matter either. BLM females are pro-abortion and declared, "We deserve and thus we demand reproductive justice," aka abortion, that gives us autonomy over our bodies and our identities while ensuring that our children and families are supported, safe, and able to thrive. Of course, aborted children don't thrive at all. BLM groups announced solidarity with reproductive justice groups back in February of 2015. Now, you cannot simultaneously fight violence while celebrating it at the same time. Abortion is the second leading cause of death in the United States and is completely preventable. Yet here we are worrying about a virus that we have absolutely no control over that kills less than 1% of the people it infects. Then, of course, on top of all that, Black Lives Matter is completely silent on all fronts when it comes to violence within the black community, which is where the real problem lies by far. The fact is that Black Lives Matter doesn't care about black deaths unless they can leverage the death for political purposes. How are all the children who are victims of drive-by shootings somehow less valuable than the lifelong criminal people like George Floyd? Very simple. The killer was black, and therefore nothing politically can be gained from promoting the injustice. BLM's only concern is when a black person is killed by a white officer, even if the killing is legal and justified. These children are living in a domestic warfare zone, and the adults should be coming to their defense, or should be coming to their defense. Do not demand change. Instead, they demand defunding the police. That would be the same police who are on the last line of defense in drug and gang ravaged neighborhoods. Residents in those neighborhoods know the vital job that police do. They don't want the police presence to be lessened, but this woke generation of Black Lives Matters activists and protesters lack both knowledge and perspective. They pretend they're fighting the same fight that Martin Luther King Jr. did 60 years ago. But this is not 1960, and we do not have Bull Connor and a roving pack of German Shepherds. The fact is that BLM members are now the Bull Connors, and there is no justice for the people they have assaulted and killed in the name of a false premise. In reality, Black Lives Matter is comprised of modern-day scam artists who learned the profitable way to protest from the Al Sharptons and Jesse Jacksons of the world. Style over substance, chaos over real change. The founders personally profit from the madness and ignorance they foster while simultaneously promoting proposals that are setting up the dismantling of our country, which is the foundation of real freedom throughout the modern world, and doing damage to the very community they claim to be representing and protecting. Is BLM setting up urban outreach programs and mentoring? No. Is BLM demanding better schools and safe community activities? No. Is BLM paying for the funerals of these black babies killed by violence? No. Has BLM set up a GoFundMe or made donations to any of the destroyed minority-owned businesses in Minneapolis where many of these ridiculously misguided riots took place? Of course not. To make it even worse, the Democratic Party is literally taking a pandering knee to them and is in bed with them. What has Nancy Pelosi done for African Americans? What has Joe Biden done? Nothing. In fact, the president they loved to hate, Donald Trump, did more in his 4 years for black Americans and police reform than Joe Biden has done in decades. With one executive order, President Trump accomplished more for police reform than the Obama-Biden administration did over all of its 8 years in office. The fact is that there is no war on black people by police officers. In this context, the specific high-profile incidents popularized by BLM take on a whole new gloss. Rather than examples of near murder of black men being gunned down with no provocation or reason, many are revealed to be tragic but mundane incidents where criminals were killed while struggling with the police. We now know the gentle giant Michael Brown, most often pictured in his high school graduation gown, was a linebacker-sized legal adult who committed a brutal strong-arm robbery just before being shot while apparently fighting with a uniformed police officer for his gun. Similarly, the Alton Sterling case, perhaps the defining BLM matter to take place in the American South, turned out to involve a career criminal and a convicted pedophile who was shot while carrying a loaded gun. Police were called to the scene specifically to respond to a report that Sterling was threatening another minority man with his gun. Look, I will be the first one to stand side by side with anyone of any race to represent those who have been unjustly killed by the police. But I believe justice comes one case at a time, and every case should be looked at through the lens of right and wrong, not what promotes a particular political brand, regardless of what side of the aisle it comes down. I firmly believe in the use of body cams when police are doing their duty. I believe that every person the police kills deserves a thorough investigation as to why they had to die. I believe police unions have become too strong and do not allow the prompt removal of police officers who have proven by their actions to be unworthy of the duties their communities has entrusted them with. But I will tell you this, their lives matter too, folks. These men and women in blue who were celebrated by all of us not more than just 20 years ago, right in the wake of 9/11, have not changed. We have changed. Who in their right senses would want to be a police officer in today's America against organizations like Black Lives Matter that have the blind backing of a derailed press corps that has become an integral part of the left? I know that I wouldn't. It's no matter that arrests have gone down dramatically, which has directly resulted in skyrocketing crime in all of our major cities who have adopted defund police movements advocated by Black Lives Matter. One more thing. If you are a true Christian, there is no way you should be supporting this organization. They are not only against everything we represent, but are against the very family structure and values that have been lost in the black community, which has caused most of their problems. We are supposed to be one people, one nation under God, and one sovereign body of Christ. There's no room for divided loyalties or two truths. There can only be one truth, and that is the word of our Lord Jesus Christ. Well, folks, it's time for me to sign off once again. It's been a pleasure to spend some time again with you. If you agreed or disagreed with anything that I've said, I strongly encourage you to leave some comments so we can have a discussion. And please take time to hit that little subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner so you can see more content. Until next time, I love you guys. I hope you and your families are well. Goodbye. God bless you all.